Welcome to Mind Games Reacts. This is a video where I essentially psychoanalyze, you would say. I look from the sport psychology perspective at the MDI finals that just happened. This is a cup leading up to the annual global finals. And in this cup, there was some would say an upset victory, although of course we don't have any perception of the relative strength of these two teams that were in the finals because one of the teams is a live pushing team, which means they haven't competed a lot in cups recently, and the other team is the 3x world champion, who were obviously favored, but there had been no matchup prior to this weekend. The championship team dropped their first set, went to the losers bracket, fought their way back up, and ended up in the finals, where they played 3 games and then lost. They lost one of the games, obviously. The second one, I think. They won the first, they lost the second, and then they went into the third heavily favored because it was their strongest dungeon, and they made a mistake, and they ended up losing. And so I want to analyze this loss from the perspective of the post-game content of the players. So in these post-game content, the players kind of talk about their mindset and their perspective. And some of the important things that they talk about are the underdog mentality. This is obviously from the team that was not favored, but believed that they could win. So I want to explain a little bit of the science behind that and how underdog mentality works and when it works and when it doesn't work. And then also talk about kind of from the loser's perspective, or the 3x championships who dropped this set, a little bit of the important nuances of their mindset that come out in the post-game content. So essentially, if I was working with this team live, for example, we would be talking about, I'm essentially going to fake coach them, right? I'm going to tell them what parts of their mindset are correct and that they should have, and that will help them perform better next time and help them perform well in this tournament, and which parts of their mindset are maybe holdovers or things that they use to emotionally feel better when they shouldn't. They should be more emotionally vulnerable on their part, things that will help them perform better in the next tournament, or would have helped them perform better in this tournament if they had corrected them beforehand. So that's kind of my perspective going into these videos, and I'll do now, right now. So now, haha, wow, what a pun. You can tell I'm a dad. I'm going to do now, right now. He is a tank for one of these teams, and he has a pretty big streaming presence, and he's a hilarious guy, very tall. You can see his social information here. I try to show his sponsors too, since I'm basically playing this from his post-loss stream. So please support him if you find this video. I'm actually a full disclosure, I'm a subscriber of his on Twitch because I use his UI in my game. I'm a fan of his UI, although I have adapted it for healing because he's not a healer. But anyway, let's hear what he has to say, and forgive the cursing. He has his Discord open as he's doing a raid clear here, and you can kind of hear his team in the background swearing a bit. I'm going to chop this video up in YouTube into 3 different parts, one that covers now, one that covers Gingy, and one that covers Dorky. And you should make sure to check out all 3 videos. I do that for 2 reasons. One, because that way I can say the other 2 videos don't have cursing in them if they don't, right? I don't have to take the hit on all 3 videos just for now's section. And the other reason is because if you guys go watch those videos and you watch one and then the other and then the other, it will really help the channel out, because that's how the algorithm works now. It's actually more beneficial to have either really, really long videos or videos that people watch kind of in sequence. So that's just how the game is played. And I like to be kind of upfront about stuff like that. I'm not doing it because it's easier or harder. It's not actually any more difficult, I don't think, for you guys to click one video to the next than it is to watch a full content one. So this, however, of course, is streamed live on Twitch, so you can also check it out when I'm doing this stuff live if you go to twitch.tv/mindgamesweldon. But you are seeing this on YouTube if you're watching the VOD. And if you're, as my chat is saying right now, if you're here, you can watch here, and then you can watch again on YouTube, and you can even play it in the background muted. I think that would be helpful. All right. Let's dive into what Now has to say. This is kind of the first question that he answers once he's about 3 minutes into the stream now. And I don't have timestamps for his video. I do have the others timestamped. We're just going to go stream of consciousness for now because he talks mainly just about this for about 10 minutes.
Yeah. Imagwad, thank you for the 11 months. And Monster, thank you for the 23, bro.
Okay. He has the Zulian.
It's all about MDI, so you didn't win.
This guy is popping.
We just played 2, I don't know.
I mean, they need to go from one.
We played too risky. At least I did. I played like so fancy, and I was trying to do so much more, like so much damage that
last time you raided, actually.
we didn't have enough practice with our playstyle. I think we played too risky.
Oh shit.
We threw so many games by
What do you call it in Final Fantasy?
by doing like risky shit when we should just have played safe.
Roger Brown.
Yeah, so I want to differentiate here between like playing risky and taking risks that are unnecessary to win. So like there's a balance between risk play in training. For one, like you never want to like play it safe in training because it's super dangerous to develop slow habits. The risky play style that they have is necessary to enforce in training. And then when you go on stage, it's like usually what happens is the pressure of the stage forces you into a more risk analysis mindset. So you play risky in training to push your limits and to develop really good habits of like optimal play. And it's really bad to hedge those too early in your training because if you do, you end up with like a less refined skill, a skill that is not like world class because you didn't push it as far as you could, right? You didn't test yourself to your limits consistently over and over again. But then what usually happens is when you go on stage, the pressure of the stage and the importance of the match like clarifies in your brain. Like you put it up on a pedestal, and then you start to make risk assessments kind of like on the fly and decide like this is not what we want to do right now. We're going to do like this move instead. And usually you practice that kind of play style in the week leading up to the match, right? You kind of dial back your normal training and you say, okay, let's pretend we're live. Let's pretend this is the actual competition. Let's play like competition mode. So my guess, if I was to ask now, I bet he would concur on this, is that the pressure of this match, because they'd already, so like in the first one, they just assumed that they were going to win in the best of three. And in the second one, they really, really wanted to win, right? But they'd already qualified. So they kind of like in their heart of hearts, they knew that they kind of like expected to win. And also if they lost, they would still qualify for the grand finals, right? So like there was pressure enough for like a competitor who's at his first tournament. But there was not enough pressure for a 3-time world champion who's like been playing other RPGs and has like, been taking a break from World of Warcraft a little bit to like chill out. There was not enough pressure to like drive the kind of risk assessment that would like rein them in, right? That would curtail them into a more like safe style of play. That would be my guess. And also that's not a bad thing, right? Because the reality is that it didn't matter that they lost since like they did qualify for the grand finals. And the only thing that's going to affect is their seeding.
I mean, Sanguine Depth was just very unlucky. I don't know what to say about Sanguine Depth.
Why don't you have a roleplay name?
That was one of a kind, but
Roger Starlight. Could have made like Roger Starlight.
the holes and the mist.
Why Starlight?
Don't steam
Oh, you guys are from the same family.
I don't know. I fucking hate the mist, man.
Georgiades of the Stars.
Sanguine Depth is kind of just unlucky.
Nah,
I don't know what to say about that one.
Off the dawn or
Yeah,
something.
exactly.
Because
Georgiades of the
your
Moon
name
Lady,
makes a lot of sense, Narco.
But anyway,
Like some random...
It doesn't really matter.
Bro, Roger, when we go to a
Any
house
up seed
party,
1 or
and
seed
people
2 in
gonna be
this
like,
cup,
"What's
it's
your
kind of
brand?"
pointless. I think
So he kind of echoed just the same thing, right? That it's you just get seed 1 or seed 2 and it doesn't really matter. But I think it's important already that he is talking about the 2 losses that led up to their final match. Because like what a lot of competitors will focus on is like the very last mistake that they made that lost the competition. So in this case, they made an error in the Sanguine Depths that was relatively unlucky. He calls it unlucky. Of course, it's kind of just like, I don't know if it's luck or lack of experience. Kind of ridiculous. I think most tanks know that the mobs that he missed were unchained. What happened was he pulled a room where the aggro table is not like linked. So if you pull one mob by range, then all the other ones don't just run after. It's like a little room in Sanguine Depths, and there's a bunch of like ladies in there, and they're all standing in a circle, like talking. And if you run in and you hit one, if you run into the room, they all fixate on you, and then they chase you and they try to kill you. And so usually what people do is they pull them out of that room to like some other location to fight them, like around a corner, because they're these nasty little caster ladies. But what he did was he stood outside the doorway and he threw a ranged ability in. Now, probably in the past, that ranged ability ricocheted onto the mobs or the ladies in that group that were not all chained together. But what happened this time was that there's 2 particular mobs that are not connected to the main pack. There's a lady standing in the corner, and then there's another lady standing like across on the far doorway, and they are not linked to the group. They don't. I guess that there's like a clique in this like group of chatty ladies, and they like maybe they don't agree with this. It's like some sort of like school dynamic going on here, and I think that they're like they see the other ladies running out of the room chasing this invader into the castle, and they're like, yeah, you just go do your thing. I'm gonna stay in here. Like, I never really liked your opinions anyway. So anyway, I don't know like why they programmed it that way. I'm imagining that that's the mentality of the developers as they're thinking about this clique that they're programming into this this group of chicks. But it could be a group of men too. Like if somebody comes and knocks at the door and wants to fight my buddy, and my buddy's like totally down, chases him out into the neighborhood, I'm not really sure that I'm gonna go out and like join the gang. I'd like to think that I would, but depends on like what he's done recently to tick me off, or if he broke my Xbox or something. So anyway, I just imagine that one of these girls like broke the other girl's Xbox, and that's why they're pissed and they don't join the fight. But they didn't join the fight, and so now was left with those two mobs that he didn't realize that they had never killed. And then you have to kill 100% of the the prescribed dungeon like mobs in order to win. And they got to the final boss, and they killed the final boss, and then they expected the game victory screen to pop up, and it didn't pop up. And they were like, oh shoot, we missed some mobs, and they had to run back and try to find some. And in that time period, they actually lost the match. So he's talking about that as being unlucky, which is, it's a good way to cope with it. Especially if you have a system in place where like it's not going to happen again, which we'll talk about more in the Gingy video. You should check that out if you haven't yet. And I think that like the important thing here is that his attention is on the matches that led to them having to play the decider match. They never would have had to play the decider match if they didn't mess up in the best of 3 and drop a game, right? And that should be the fixation of people who are real competitors, is like the myriad of things that they did wrong leading up to the point that led to the final mistake, rather than the fact that like, oh, if they had just run out of the boss room and killed one mob that had luckily been there, they would have won. And how unbelievably unlucky that there was no bat there. Like, you shouldn't fixate on that when you shouldn't even been in that game in the first place, if you played really well. And that should be like you would say like the championship mindset, and it apparently is the one that he has, which makes sense since he's a champion.
It's actually even like better to lose.
Like a stripper, looks like a stripper, makes perfect sense.
You learn more from your losses than your wins. So
job later at 12.
We skip this.
I don't know, man.
Oh, the night shifts, of course.
Crazy ring.
Yeah, the night.
It's kind of true. You don't necessarily learn more. It's that a lot of people like could learn from their wins, but don't because they won. And so they're like, yay, that was good enough, right? So like, let's assume that what he's saying is true. Then that means that if they had won, they would have been like, okay, we made a bunch of mistakes, but like, we didn't get punished for it. Like, us at our worst day is still good enough to win the championship. Like, that's what the world is telling them if they win that match, right? The universe is saying, like, you on your worst day making all these stupid mistakes is still enough to win a championship. So you don't need to worry at all about this upcoming tournament. Like, you're fine. Like, just refine your play, and they would have gone into the next training, all kind of like happy-go-lucky and working on their mistakes and whatever. But now they're going in as the loser, and they're really going to scrutinize the things that they messed up systemically, and they're going to be like, other people aren't doing this. Like, other people who we should be better than aren't doing this. So let's fix it. So in that way, it's like true. But this is a mindset you can take also from your victories if you're like super, super... I would say, like, let's say you've won one world championship and you're going into your second, and you're like really, really bent on getting your second. Like, that's the mindset you have. Or if you've won 2 and you're like, I want to achieve perfection. I want to achieve immortality. I want to win 3 championships, But then, like, at some point, you're a little bit burnt out, kind of like Mecca Phelps. He went into one Olympics, and then he went to the second Olympics, and then by the third one, he was just kind of like, London was, as he talks about, like his lowest point in terms of like laziness and lack of prep. And he goes to London and he wins, right? He loses some. I think he got like 6 medals that one, 6 golds maybe, and then a couple other medals. But like, it was because his fire had kind of like dwindled, and so he wasn't able to take as much from his wins and his training and his refinement. He wasn't able to throw as much of himself into it. But when you lose, then it kind of like ignites it back in you and says like, okay, well, there's somebody out there who's hungry, and their hunger inspires you because they're ahead of you now. It's really, really easy to be the guy who's climbing the mountain trying to push the king of the mountain off, and it's really hard to be the king of the mountain fending everybody off for a long time. Eventually you just get tired of it, but once you're back like climbing the mountain again, all of your motivation returns. So that's kind of like what plays into this concept of you win more or you learn more from your losses. The other thing is you learn more from people who can actually beat you. If there's actually teams good enough to beat you, then like they force you to level up. If nobody is good enough to beat you, you never question the status quo of what you're doing, and you just think that like it's good enough to win. So you don't often like go and refine it more and more, unless you have like a challenge there pushing you. So in this case, it's really good for the environment at large that there's like a competitor to this team that can actually force them to, go back to the drawing board and perfect some things.
The night shift at the club.
You decided you throw glaive, messed it up in Sanguine Depths? Yeah, well, that's a thing you've done in practice every single time, and in the first game, and then in the finals, something weird happens.
But
I don't know,
I
man.
swear he must have the.
Are you out now? No, we're in globals. Just didn't win our cup because we threw like crazy. Played bad.
I will need to do
like
something.
Miss is like a prime example where we are pretty far ahead.
You can also come into the.
We could literally have played the boss solo and done trash after the boss, and we would still have won.
It's for the trading.
But for some reason, we decided that let's just do what we did in practice. That didn't always work, and
Bro, I had to try so hard on Saturday to.
And then we just lost the entire series.
And now everyone wants to pass it.
So this is what I was talking about at the beginning. Remember where I said like the pressure of the match wasn't high enough to force them to take lower risks to secure their victory, because like you can't fool your brain, right? If you don't care about it as much, you don't do as much risk assessment. That's just how it works in competition. So your brain is like operating at the level of the importance, like the subconscious importance of the match. So that's kind of like what that's a reflection of.
He put it on purpose.
That's an trifle, dude. That's a trifle.
Run a wall.
The protocols, by the way, there's protocols to fix that. And that is like, for example, in training, if we want to raise the importance of a match, we take a break beforehand and we don't meditate, but we think about the importance of it. Because if you think about it like a game day, right? Think about a normal practice day. You go and you just like play a bunch of games, and you train and you go kind of right into it. And then afterwards you're just done and you don't think about it anymore. Or you think about it or you go back and you just play some more. On a game day, you might, like, for example, my League of Legends teams, right? On a practice day, we might show up at 9 and start training at 9:30 and play 6 games in a row with 10, 20, 30-minute breaks in between, and then just be done. And then a few minutes later, they'd be playing solo queue. On a game day, they'll come and they'll play maybe like one warm-up game. And then we'll have like 4 or 5 hours where we're like busing to the studio. We're getting ready. We're doing the pregame prep. We're doing the pregame presentation. We're like, getting our stuff set up on stage, like doing the draft and like everything. And it's like 4 or 5 hours of just sitting there thinking about the upcoming match. And your brain starts to think like, maybe this game's important. Like this human here is like anticipating this game for like 4 straight hours. So maybe it's really important whether we win or lose this. Like the brain's like, I think it's important. I think I'm getting some clues here that this upcoming thing is like important. Like look how much we're isolating it from other games. We're like putting it up on a pedestal and we're really like anticipating a lot. And then afterwards we're mourning it for hours, right in the post game. We like go off stage, we go into the back, we're into the green room. Nobody's playing, everybody's just thinking and thinking and thinking about the mistakes that they made or the successes they had. And that kind of like, again, raises the importance of this tournament match. And then eventually you get on the bus, and you go back to your training facility, and then you might finally play like another game and start to decompress. But in the meanwhile, your brain is like, I guess that was super important. I should take a lot of lessons from it. And beforehand is like, hyping up importance. So you can mimic this in order to artificially raise the importance of some sort of training match or match that is less important to you. You can mimic that same kind of like setup in order to do that. So there's protocols for counteracting the forces that were hitting Gingy and NAOWH's team.
Keybind my Seraphim.
I didn't ask people that play like the classes.
Yeah, I thought you wanted another Warlock.
This is funny because I was watching his stream yesterday and he was like, oh shoot, I need to keybind my Seraphim on his healing spec. And he didn't have a keybound. Or he needed to keybound something. I don't know if it was Seraphim. Maybe that's not in holy spec.
Oh. Nah, I want to play my mages. Fuck Warlock.
If anyone wants to play
Guess we made it to the big finals?
Yeah, really good.
I mean, we're already in the big finals. Like, literally winning or ending up second in this cup didn't matter at all.
We are safe in this red.
If anything, like I said, I think it was actually better
I'm
losing.
actually wanting to
Because
cross mythic on all my characters, actually.
then we, we learn more from a loss than we do from a win.
I actually believe him. I actually believe him.
Nah, he isn't.
I actually have the idea.
Right.
Didn't kill him
We talked about that
You have
already.
a bad day or Incarnation an awesome day?
It doesn't
I mean,
work
Incarnation is an awesome
possible.
team.
And since then you went in the red
But-
anymore, so you don't have the ID.
I mean, I don't know. I'm not gonna speak for them if they had a bad or a good day.
Oh, bro.
We had a really bad day.
Yeah, you're talking.
It's really, it kind of like does not matter at all. If you are favoriting yourself to win, like in your heart of hearts, if you're kind of like, we should beat these guys. Internally, right? Like forgetting sportsmanship and what you say publicly. If you like, you're pretty confident that you're like, I'm better, which you kind of need to be to have this kind of mindset to compete at the top. And we'll see that more in Dorky's stream too. Like we're going to talk about that as the underdog, right? Underdog has to do with public perception, but also personal perception. There's like the underdog as publicly, and then there's the underdog like mentality that you can have internally or not. But anyway, like if you actually like in your heart of hearts, you like kind of feel like you're better than your opponent. It doesn't matter how much you respect the people, how much you like the people, how much like people ask you afterwards, like you don't want to talk about your opponents or think about your opponents. You're just like, it's such a sour feeling to lose at the like top level. And then like, you just, I can just tell, maybe it'll come out in the rest of this conversation too, as we watch, like, but you can just tell that like, he does not want to talk about Incarnation at all. Like he thinks that they're fine, you know, and maybe they played well, maybe they didn't play well, but like he's more like he's more focused on like the fact that he lost to these people than like what they did to win.
Made a ton of mistakes. Me personally. It was like 2 dungeons.
Dude, my voice again. Exploded.
The holes, I was super fucking greedy.
And you were completely silent for a whole round.
And I didn't have proc.
Exactly what's going
I know
on.
it's not smart.
Little Barons.
Because like Ashton was down, I had demon spikes. I'm like, I'm fine. I'm not gonna meta yet.
And then I played one just for
I'm gonna let my spikes fade and I'm gonna meta. It was like 2 seconds. And then I just fucking died.
To get the ed down in time. So.
He didn't overlap his.
So that was one good fuck up right there.
Covenant,
And then missed.
What am I saying?
Well, 2 times missed. The first time, I don't remember what happened the first time. We didn't have a. Oh yeah, it was like
Ads on the
Are
left
we
side.
splitting or not?
Gorgulet killed 2 people with tongue lash, I think.
After this raid.
I remember this moment. Gorgulet killed their new melee monk player. Clicks, I think is his name. I don't know if he's new or not, so I don't know anything about him because I've only been following this team for like a year. And he could be a member of their raid group, you know, for all I know, or like a previous member of their MDI team. But my point is, if you have a new member on a team and they are the ones that are like dying and messing up and losing you the tournament, especially like a tournament like this, it can get to be a problem. It can get to be a problem for that individual, for his pressure in the next tournament and like his choking. And then it can also be a problem for the team dynamic as a whole if you don't have super mature people who know how to like build up their teammates and make them feel like they can trust themselves and make sure that for example, regardless of what Now and Gingy say, Clicks could feel like they don't trust him and that they cannot depend on him based on like his success or failure personally in the tournament. And it's up to the veteran members of the team or the current members of the roster to like give the signs and symbols and like encouragement to the rookie that like they can take the same risks that the veteran is allowed to in order to improve. Otherwise, they might start playing more hedged, which leads to this downward spiral of like skill development. And I've seen this happen like time and time again with rookie members on a team who like don't want to mess up in front of their like veterans, and then what happens is they play too safe and then they don't improve fast enough and then they don't take the right risks in the game and then they just are not good. They're just not sharp. They're just not like world-class level. And so I think this is not going to happen with Echo because a bunch of veterans, like in the same mist where like Clicks died, right? It was not the reason that they lost. What happened later was that Gingy, who's like their main like one of the main members of the team, like one of the core veterans who's won 3 championships back to back with NAOWH, he died on the final boss pulling in the trash. And then like the person who had to res him then died like resing him. So it was actually like, and then NAOWH lost the whole series with the missed pull, right? So it was actually the veterans that like caused the game losing mistakes that were like apparent like kind of at the end. And so these like kind of like smaller mistakes that actually contribute to it, which would have been game losing had the veteran players not messed up, like Clix kind of gets a free pass on them, which means that like his mental should develop like quite naturally and there should be no danger there. But otherwise it's like a pretty, this like gore gullet death where he like died to this very simple mechanic of like a frontal tongue lash. It could be pretty damning.
And it has to be just slow. And then like Mike died on the last boss.
You need to summon
Mike is
And
Jinjin.
Ken tried to rest him and also died.
Ken
After
must
he popped
be
Ashen.
the heal.
And then
the
everything went to
healer.
shit because the trash didn't die.
I'm just getting
And it's kind of hard to recover on a last boss to kite 6 fortified mobs with 50% movement slow.
Into Dark Pact? I don't know. Nothing happens.
Come on, Roger. I have no idea what tactic you wanna play here. I really am up for all.
Let's do the
what you
normal
want.
one, please, man.
Pads
Normal.
left, normies
But just,
right.
I don't know, just bad play and a bit of...
I think the melee.
But I like a similar cup in
Just all
BFA,
left,
where
that's where the
I need to
Okay,
lower
well-
the TeamSpeak.
Okay, all left.
Thank you. Yes,
other
lower the
thing
team
was
speak.
bait,
Oh,
dude.
gee.
It's bait.
Roger, you ready?
Oh, one sec.
We had like a similar, I remember we had something similar in BFA, we had a cup where everything just went not what we hoped for, kinda.
Thanks, bro.
I think that's probably it. I think after this they don't do much chat about the MDI. Maybe he does, but I didn't watch his whole
Can you
stream.
please explain why you use Blind Faith?
Okay, yeah. So now he's talking about his paladin. This is literally the benefit of experience. When he's talking about like, oh, this has happened before. There's all sorts of unknowns that happen after a loss like this. It's like, are we bad now? Are we going to bounce back? Are we never going to get there again? Do we have something to prove? Did we choke, or are we just like over the hill? You have all these like fears, these like subconscious kind of like maybe like voices, right? Self-talk that you can have when you're like training, when you're competing, when you're posting content. Like people have this in small ways, like all the time. When you post something to Instagram and you're like, how many likes am I going to get? And you get like 70, let's say. And then the next day you post something and you only get 15. And you have all these like doubts that kind of creep in, even though you didn't change. And you kind of know that like, it's just like an algorithm, right? It doesn't really mean anything. But then still, it like hits you a little bit in a way. So, or let's say you make some really good food and then you're like really proud of it and you're really excited, and then you like go to make it again and it's like, it's really not good. Like you taste it and you're like, this isn't what you're right. And you feed it to the people that you love in your family, and like they praise it and they're like, yeah, it's good. But like secretly you're like, but it could have been so good. Like it wasn't, like, it's nice of you to say that, but I already know that like what did I do to mess up? You know, like you can have these like kind of like narratives of self-talk that will pop up. And after a loss like this, there's a whole plethora of them that generally you have to deal with. And the benefit of experience is you can have already argued against all of those logical, like all of those negative narratives. So all of these like negative self-talk, you would have already like challenged them and been like, no, this instead. Like, no, we haven't peaked. Like we're just working on refining. Like, no, we aren't going to like stay down here. We're going to get back up. Like, no, we aren't going to never prove anything. Like we are going to prove it. And then on top of that, they've gone and like done it, right? They've gone and like actually then won after. Whoops. And so the benefit of experience means that like he doesn't have to work through the like self-talk challenges. You can just like get back on the horse and like focus on like productive training behaviors. It's really beneficial. That's something also you get from the underdog mindset, which is like those things don't challenge you because you're like, well, I didn't expect to win anyway. So the fact that we lost is like already accounted for, and my drive is still intact. You know, I don't have to have any of this negative self-talk. So I think that I hope that the other members of his team, usually if they weren't champions with him, it's irrelevant that they lost here because they're super excited that they won anything at all. That's one of the disparities that I've had on teams where I've had like multiple championship winners and then total rookies, is that like what is super exciting for a rookie, which is like, oh my gosh, I got second place in an MDI and I like qualified for the globals, is amazing. And then your teammates are like, this sucks. And you're like, really? It's like going to the casino and winning $1,000 and you're like, oh my gosh. And meanwhile, your like friend who like usually wins 10K every weekend is like, this is lame. And you're like, okay, well, yeah, just for you, you know? So there's this disparity of motivation that can occur between like the next training practice where like the guy who's just excited that they won maybe might play a little bit more laissez-faire, like nothing has changed, like, hey, let's just keep going. Whereas like the two veterans are like, no, we must change the way we train. We must not make the same mistakes because we played horrible. And the other guy's like, okay, I guess. Like that can happen. Obviously, it's different when it's a self-coached team, right? When there's a coach there that kind of like has a hierarchy, establishes a player-coach hierarchy, then there needs to be a tone that is set. But when it's all a player-coach team, they hash these conversations out themselves. And usually you're aware of like how your teammate is training and how they feel about the win or the loss. And they get kind of all on the same page. That's what all this team building stuff is for, is like to make sure that everybody's on the same page with trust and like what it is that they want to do and how they see the events that they just lived through. So, all right, that's it. Make sure to check out the Jinji video and the Dorky video. They're just as insightful and interesting. And also come to Twitch and check out this stuff live when I'm actually doing the analysis. And make sure to support Now, please. I put his socials up here, and you can see his sponsors also from his stream.